High above, the glowing towers of Aurora Prime, the most powerful dragon in the galaxy, spread his golden wings to stun the watching crowds. Yet, in a single heartbeat, the unshakable Titan faltered, his massive body collapsing with a force that silenced millions and left the universe holding its breath. What happened next would defy everything humans believed about dragons. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The Galactic Sanctuary of Aurora Prime was a wonder known across the stars. It was not just a zoo, but a living archive of rare creatures gathered from distant worlds. People from dozens of planets traveled light years to witness the beings that lived here. But among all the creatures in the sanctuary, none drew the same awe as Solari, the golden dragon. Solari was enormous, his body stretching longer than a city shuttle, his wings broad enough to shadow entire courtyards of the station. His scales shimmered like molten sunlight, glowing with patterns of light that shifted and pulsed. Scientists called it bioluminescent language, a code of signals no one had fully understood. Sometimes the patterns glowed steady, a sign of calm. Sometimes they flickered fast, warning of aggression. But there were times when they moved in ways that even the experts could not explain. On this day, the artificial skies of the sanctuary were painted with a brilliant sunset. Solari climbed to the top of the synthetic volcano, 300 feet above the crowds. Every visitor looked up as he spread his wings. The gas vents below sent plumes of glowing steam into the air, framing the dragon in a display no artist could ever replicate. Down below, thousands of eyes followed him. A family from Mars whispered in awe, their children pressing against the safety glass. Travelers from Jupiter's moons pointed their holorecorders upward, capturing every detail. Even off-world ambassadors stood silently, captivated by the living legend before them. Dr. Amira Khalin, the lead xenobiologist, stood in the control room, her hands steady on the railing. She had studied Solari for over 20 years, mapping his health, his language, his instincts. Beside her was Jonas Reyes, the caretaker who had worked in the sanctuary longer than anyone alive. Jonas called Solari not just an exhibit, but a neighbor, a presence he had lived beside for half his lifetime. As the crowd waited, Solari gave his usual signal. His wings rippled with light, gold shifting to deep crimson, before returning again. He lowered his head, flexed his talons, and prepared for his famous spiral dive. It was the performance everyone came to see, a breathtaking dive that showcased his strength, his beauty, his dominance. But then something unexpected happened. His left wing twitched. Not with the practiced precision of flight, but with a sharp, uncontrolled spasm. His balance shifted. His claws scraped the artificial rock, sparks flying. The crowd gasped in delight, thinking it was part of the show. But in the control room, red alerts flashed across the screens. Neural irregularity detected. The monitoring system reported. Primary heart function unstable. Dr. Amira's eyes widened. Jonas, that's not right. Jonas shook his head, disbelief in his voice. He's never faltered before. Solari tried to adjust, leaning to his right side, but his massive weight betrayed him. The signals flashing across his scales grew erratic, pulsing without pattern. His golden eyes, usually so sharp and alive, dulled. His great head swayed as if the strength that had carried him for 70 years was gone in an instant. Then came the fall. The sanctuary trembled as Solari's 9-ton body collapsed. It was not a graceful descent. His wings folded beneath him like bro. His chest struck the rock, and the entire synthetic mountain shook. The sound of impact echoed through the habitat, a noise that seemed to silence the very air. The crowd below erupted in confusion. Children screamed, parents pulled them back, and alarms blared as safety barriers rose from the floor. Drinks spilled, recording devices clattered to the ground. Panic swept through the observation deck. Inside the control room, Amira whispered, "He's going down." The monitors told the truth no one wanted to face. Solari's primary heart had stopped. His secondary heart struggled, beating unevenly, a desperate attempt to keep him alive. For the first time in living memory, the dragon who had never shown weakness lay silent. The other dragons in the enclosure reacted instantly. Solara, his emerald-scaled mate, froze mid-step, her gaze fixed on him. The younger males stopped their play near the lava pools. Juveniles who had been chasing holographic prey darted to the edges of the H. An unnatural stillness fell over them all. What struck everyone most was not the collapse itself, but the silence that followed. Solari's roars once filled the sanctuary, his heartbeat so powerful it could be felt in the ground. But now, there was nothing. No sound of his breath, no pulse of light across his scales. Visitors pressed against the barriers, desperate to see. Staff shouted orders, trying to calm the chaos. But within the habitat, time itself seemed to pause. "Doctor." Amira leaned over the console. "We need to get in there now." Jonas shook his head. "Not yet. Look." And there, within the dust and settling quiet, something extraordinary began. While the humans scrambled in confusion, the dragons turned their focus not outward, but inward. They were not scattering in fear. They were not fighting for dominance. They were waiting, watching Solari, as if preparing for something none of the humans had ever seen. The fall of the giant had begun a chain of events that would change everything humans thought they knew about dragons. The moment Solari collapsed, the sanctuary of Aurora Prime changed forever. Alarms blared, tourists panicked, and staff rushed to initiate emergency procedures. But inside the habitat itself, where the dust of broken rocks still hung in the heated air, the dragons were not fleeing. They were moving with purpose, driven by instincts no human had ever witnessed. Solara, Solari's mate, reacted first. Her emerald wings unfolded with a sweep so wide it cast a shadow over Solari's still head. She did not roar, she did not attack, but she stretched her wing across him like a shield. The gesture was clear: protection. Even in a controlled environment where rain never fell and predators did not exist, she behaved as though guarding him from unseen dangers. The juveniles scattered to the edges of the enclosure at first, startled by the tremor of Solari's fall. But gradually, one of the younger males stepped forward. His name was Caden, known among the handlers for his reckless energy. Normally, he challenged the others, snapping playfully, testing dominance. Now he lowered his head, wings tight against his body, and let out a soft, broken chirp. It was a sound reserved for hatchlings, not for a leader like Solari. He tried again. Louder this time, a call of concern, but Solari did not respond. The control room fell into silence as the staff watched. Dr. Amira Kalan leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. "Are they forming something?" she whispered. Jonas Reyes, his voice rough with disbelief, nodded. "They're not panicking, they're protecting him." And it was true. One by one, the other dragons began to move into position. 3 adult females approached carefully, circling Solari's enormous body. They crouched low, their wings angled outward, creating a living barricade between him and the rest of the enclosure. Their golden eyes swept the habitat, daring any threat to come closer. On the observation decks, visitors stopped screaming. Instead, they stood frozen, staring at the display. Even through the barriers, the message was clear. This was no accident of behavior. This was something deliberate, something ancient, something far older than the walls of the sanctuary. Suddenly, the habitat filled with sound. It was not a roar of anger, nor a cry of battle. Solara lowered her massive head and released a deep, vibrating hum. It shook the ground, resonated through the glass, and traveled into the bones of every human who heard it. Then, like an orchestra rising from silence, the other dragons joined in. The tones blended into a haunting harmony that filled every corner of the space. Dr. Arden Fay, the sanctuary's medical lead, stared in astonishment. That's not random. That's a ritual. They're singing. Amira's voice was soft but steady. They're not just defending him, they're calling to him. The crowd that had been in chaos just moments ago was now still. A child who had been crying minutes earlier stopped mid-sob, staring wide-eyed. Ambassadors who had come to analyze the dragon's beauty now stood motionless, listening. Even the crystalline delegates from Centurion Prime, whose bodies constantly chimed like glass bells, grew silent. The song commanded attention. The sanctuary had never seen anything like it. The dragons, believed to be solitary and instinct-driven, were acting as a united family. Their protective formation, their harmony, their refusal to allow humans inside, all of it pointed to a depth of intelligence and emotion no scientist had ever documented. Inside the control room, tension grew. Amira slammed her hand on the console. We have to get to him. If we don't intervene, his secondary heart will fail within minutes. Arden shook his head. Look at them. Anyone who enters now will be burned alive. They're not letting us near him. Jonas studied the dragons carefully, his weathered eyes searching for something. Then his face shifted, as if a memory surfaced. Amira, he said slowly, remember the recordings, the ones from Solari's youth, the first sounds he made when he was just a hatchling. Amira's eyes widened. The contact calls. Yes, get the file. Moments later, the speakers inside the habitat crackled to life. A high-pitched call, recorded decades earlier, echoed across the enclosure. It was Solari as a juvenile, a sound of longing, a sound young dragons made when separated from their kin. The effect was immediate. Every dragon froze. Their heads turned sharply toward the sound. Solara's great emerald eyes blinked once. Then she answered with a call of her own. The pitch was deeper, mournful, but filled with hope. Again, Amira commanded, loop it. The recording played a C, then a third. Each time, the dragons responded. Their formation shifted. They did not abandon their leader, but they created a path, a deliberate opening towards Solari's massive body. It was as though they were granting permission, an invitation to join them in their vigil. Amira's voice carried a mixture of fear and resolve. They're letting us in. Arden's jaw tightened. Or they're testing us. One wrong move, and we're dead. Jonas's voice was quiet, but firm. They know we want to help. This is trust, fragile but real. If we hesitate, we lose him. The decision was made. The dragons had drawn their circle. They had shown unity, protection, and something beyond instinct. Perhaps loyalty, perhaps love. And now, in this rare moment, they had opened a door for the humans to step through. The circle of guardians had spoken without words, and their message was clear. Solari was theirs, but if the humans dared to prove themselves, They might just be allowed to save him. The path the dragons created was narrow, but it was enough. Dr. Amira Kalan and Dr. Arden Faye stood at the edge of the enclosure gate, fully suited in protective gear. The heat from the habitat radiated through even the reinforced material of their suits. Every breath inside their helmets felt heavy. Around them, monitors flashed with warnings. But what weighed most was the steady gaze of the dragons. 12 pairs of eyes followed their every move. Jonas Reyes' voice crackled through their comms. "You've got your chance. Make it count." The two scientists stepped through the containment field. The moment they crossed, the air shifted. The temperature soared to 40 degrees, thick with sulfur and ash from the artificial vents. The ground trembled faintly beneath their boots, still unsettled from Solari's collapse. Solara, Solari's emerald-scaled mate, loomed nearby. She was close enough that Amira could see the reflection of her own face in the glossy green plates. Solara lowered her head, massive jaws parting slightly, as if testing the strangers who dared to enter. "Easy," Amira whispered, though she knew the dragon could not understand her words. What Solara could understand, however, was intent. So Amira moved slowly, her hands visible, her steps steady. To the amazement of everyone watching from the control room, Solara stepped aside. She did not retreat, but she allowed them passage. It was a gesture of extraordinary trust. As they approached Solari, the scale of his fallen form overwhelmed them. Up close, he was not just magnificent, he was immense. Each scale was the size of a dinner plate. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. The bioluminescent patterns that once pulsed with rhythm now flickered randomly, sparks of light without meaning. "Secondary heart is failing," Amira reported, her voice heavy with urgency. "Arden, prepare the stabilizer." Dr. Arden Faye knelt beside Solari. ... Pulling out the massive injection unit. It had been designed years ago specifically for dragon physiology, but never before tested in such a critical moment. The needle was nearly the length of his arm, forged to pierce through the thick armor of scales. Before he could act, a small movement caught their attention. One of the juveniles approached, dragging something in its mouth. It was a piece of volcanic rock, still warm from the heating elements of the habitat. The young dragon dropped it against Solari's side, then stepped back, watching intently. Arden blinked. Did that dragon just bring him comfort? Amira's throat tightened. They know he's sick. They're trying to help. Another juvenile followed, carrying dried fronds from the nesting area. It placed them carefully near Solari's wing, as though offering bedding. One of the adult females nudged Solari's massive tail, shifting it into a more natural position. These were not random gestures. They were care behaviors, proof of empathy in a species long believed to be solitary and detached. "Arden, we have to move now," Amira said. He nodded, adjusting the injector. With careful precision, he placed the point against Solari's chest. The dragons around them did not attack, but their humming grew louder, vibrating through the floor. The sound was not threatening, but it carried weight, as if urging Solari to hold on. "Here goes everything," Arden muttered, and pressed the trigger. The reaction was immediate. Solari's entire body convulsed. His tail lashed, striking the ground with a force that sent Arden tumbling backward. His wings shuddered, unfolding only halfway before collapsing again. The monitors on Amira's wrist display flickered wildly, showing a surge of unstable heart rhythms. Amira rushed forward, placing both hands on Solari's scales, feeling the tremors of life trying to return. "Come on," she whispered. "Stay with us." The dragons raised their voices in unison, the humming turning into a resonant chorus. Solara moved closer, placing her forefoot gently against Solari's neck. It was not restraint. It was comfort, the same gesture she would use to calm a distressed hatchling. Suddenly, the monitor spiked. Solari's secondary heart, after faltering, caught rhythm. Then, 30 seconds later, the primary heart followed, syncing with steady, powerful beats. "He's stabilizing," Amira breathed. "Both hearts are back." In the control room, cheers erupted, but inside the habitat, no one moved. The dragons held their positions, their humming easing into a low, steady vibration, a sound of relief. Arden, still catching his breath, looked up at the giant beast. "We can't leave him here. He won't survive long without full treatment." Amira nodded. "He has to be moved to the medical bay." "But how? He weighs 9 tons. The equipment can't get through the barriers." As if in answer, Solara lowered herself beside Solari. With deliberate care, she slid her head under his massive wing. Across from her, Caden, the young male who had first called to Solari, mirrored her action. Together, they shifted his body slightly, lifting just enough to prove their intent. Then, one by one, the other dragons moved in. The females supported his sides. The juveniles steadied his tail. The younger males braced his wings. Arden stared in disbelief. "They're going to carry him." Amira's voice was barely a whisper. "They want him alive as much as we do." From the observation deck, the visitors watched as the dragons arranged themselves around their fallen leader, preparing to move him toward the open doors of the medical bay. It was a sight no human had ever dreamed possible. Creatures of fire and scale, once feared as dangerous and solitary, working together with purpose and care. Between fire and trust, something extraordinary had been born. The dragons had opened the sea. They had accepted the humans. And now, for the first time in history, both species would carry the weight of a giant together. The sight was unlike anything the sanctuary of Aurora Prime had ever seen. Solari's massive body was lifted not by machines or human strength, but by his own kind. Dragons that had once been labeled solitary predators now worked together as a family. Solara bore the heaviest weight, sliding her emerald head beneath Solari's wing, while the younger males braced his sides and the juveniles steadied his tail. The procession moved slowly toward the towering doors of the medical bay. Humans along the corridors stood frozen. Guards who had raised weapons lowered them, unable to act against what looked like a miracle. Visitors pressed against the barriers, watching in silence as 9 dragons carried their fallen leader. The thud of their steps echoed like a heartbeat, steady and determined. The medical bay, built for large creatures, but never for this many, seemed impossibly small as the dragons entered, yet they maneuvered with care, arranging themselves so Solari could be lowered gently onto the reinforced platform. The floor groaned under his weight, but held firm. Dr. Amira Kalan and Dr. Arding Faye hurried to his side, their medical team already preparing equipment. Scanners lit up, projecting a glowing map of Solari's internal structure above the platform. The image revealed the truth. A dark mass lodged in his primary heart. Arden's face tightened. A clot, massive. How did we miss this? Amira scanned the records. Months ago, when we sedated him for habitat repairs, the sedative, it triggered this. We thought it was harmless. Then we caused this, Arden muttered. grief in his voice. Amira steadied herself. "We don't have time for guilt. We fix it. Prep for surgery." For 6 hours, the medical team worked. It was a task no one had imagined possible. Open heart surgery on a dragon. Every incision was done under the watchful eyes of the flight. Solara never moved far from Solari's head. If he stirred or faltered, she would lower her wing protectively, as though reminding the humans of the cost of failure. The humming of the dragons never ceased, a low vibration that filled the sterile bay with a strange and ancient music. Finally, with trembling hands, Arden pulled the clot free. It was the size of a sphere, heavy and dense, a mass that should have ended Solari's life long ago. How he had endured this long was a mystery, perhaps explained only by his dual hearts and unyielding will. "Closing now," Amira announced, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. Regenerative therapies hummed to life, sending pulses of healing energy into Solari's body. His scales, dulled by illness, began to regain a faint shimmer. Then came the waiting. Hours passed, then days. The dragons never left. They took turns resting. But at least 3 always remained at his side. Solara refused to mow, her gaze fixed on Solari's face. Juveniles brought objects from the habitat, rocks, fragments of scales, even heated stones, as though surrounding him with comfort. Outside the medical bay, the story spread across the galaxy. News feeds carried the images, dragons carrying Solari, dragons standing guard, dragons singing over their fallen leader. Headlines declared, "Dragons show empathy," "A new chapter in interspecies understanding," and "The day dragons changed history." Billions watched, waiting for updates. On the 3rd day, Solari opened his eyes. Golden light returned to them, dim but alive. His first sight was Solara, who leaned close and released a soft, hopeful chirp. In response, Solari exhaled a weak puff of smoke, almost like laughter. Cheers erupted across the station. The other dragons approached, each offering gestures of recognition. A wing stretch, a tail curl, a flicker of bioluminescence. It was not dominance, it was respect, joy, and reunion. Amira's voice cracked as she whispered, "He's back." When Solari was finally strong enough, the medical bay doors opened wide. The procession reversed, but this time, Solari walked. His steps were slow, his wings unsteady, but he moved with dignity. The other dragons surrounded him, not carrying, but supporting. The crowd waiting in the observation deck erupted into applause, the sound rolling like thunder. Solari paused at the threshold of his habitat. He turned his great head toward the watching humans. For a long moment, predator and prey, alien and caretaker, stared at one another. Then Solari lowered his head in a subtle bow. Arden's voice caught. "Did he just?" Amira nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "He thanked us." What followed changed everything. The sanctuary no longer treated the dragons as displays. Instead, they became partners, their behaviors guiding new protocols. When medical checks were needed, the staff used Solari's juvenile call, and the dragons responded, cooperating with calm understanding. Tourists who had once demanded dramatic shows now witnessed something rarer, true dragon life. They saw how juveniles learned, how adults nurtured, how the flight worked together as a family. And slowly, even the most skeptical visitors realized the truth. Dragons were not just creatures of legend. They were beings of deep intelligence, empathy, and connection. Weeks later, Amira stood in her office. Watching Solari rest beneath his favorite basalt formation, Solara beside him, the juveniles splashed in the thermal pools, guarded by the adults. It looked simple, like ordinary animal life, but those who had seen Solari's collapse knew better. On her desk lay a report recommending the end of dragon captures and the creation of protected preserves. Signing it meant challenging powerful corporations. But she did not hesitate. Her assistant AI chimed, "Message incoming from Kepler Research Base." The hologram of a young scientist appeared, eyes bright. "Dr. Callan, we've found them, a colony. Hundreds of dragons in the southern volcanic ranges. They live in families. They are organized, everything you predicted." Amira smiled softly. "Then protect them. Ask permission before you act. We have a lot to learn." Back in the habitat, Solari lifted his head, his golden eyes sweeping across the sanctuary. The younger dragons played. The older ones kept watch. And Solara rested near his side. Together, they were whole. And in that moment, a new dawn for dragons began, not as exhibits, not as mysteries to solve, but as partners in a shared future, living proof that even across species, trust and care could change the galaxy.